Well, hey, welcome to In the Growth Space. My name is David McGlennon, and this is the show for business owners and leaders who have a hunger and thirst for growth. I really appreciate you listening in today. And if this is your first time listening, welcome. I really appreciate it. I'd just recommend that you go back to episodes 1 and 2 just to hear a little bit about my story, because this podcast is all about growth. I love talking about growth, whether it's business growth or team growth or even personal growth. And I do hope that you'll subscribe and listen regularly, but sometimes it helps to go back and hear kind of my story so that you know a little bit about where I'm at and why this is so important to me. I love having conversations with leaders like who I have on today. I have a great friend of mine, Greg Storch, who I'll tell you about here in just a moment. But they all have great growth stories, and I like to learn from them. And then selfishly, they'll help me with my own growth as well. And then I get to share them with you. Now, before we get started in today's episode with Greg, I just want to let you know that we've got some really exciting news. If you didn't hear it on last week's episode, the registration for the Inner Circle Summit is open, and we have a great announcement for our keynote speaker. It's Paul Martinelli. Paul Martinelli is, of course, a native of Pittsburgh. He is the co-founder of the John Maxwell Team, shared the stage with all kinds of greats like John Maxwell and Seth Godin and Zig Ziglar, Les Brown, Jack Canfield, and Mark Victor Hansen. So I'm really super excited to have him here on December the 10th at the Inner Circle Summit. We also have been able to secure some of his time for a very exclusive VIP evening on Thursday, December the 9th, where you will have an opportunity to ask him questions. You can bring Paul your business growth questions. You can bring him your personal growth questions. He's such a great coach and mentor. We're going to be limiting this to a very, very small group of people. So you better jump on quickly and register quickly before we sell it out. On the registration page, there is a little checkbox that you can check for the VIP option. And when you do that, that'll get added to your registration. And that registration page, of course, is davidmcglennon.com/Inner Circle Summit, which is all lowercase. Now, on today's show, I have a great friend of mine, Greg Storch. Greg is a retired naval officer, and he's living abroad in Italy. He's also the owner of Lion Enterprise, which is a leadership development and coaching business. He's also the founder of a worldwide bartered coaching program called The Helping Hand. He's a certified professional leadership coach through the International Coach Federation and focuses on working with new leaders. He's also a certified speaker and trainer with the John Maxwell Team, and that's where I met Greg. And currently, Greg is working with the Army's Transition Assistance Program in Vicenza, Italy. And that's where he serves as a transition counselor who coaches service members through their transition from the military back to civilian life. This is just a great conversation with a good friend. And I think that you'll see here in a moment why I really enjoy Greg. So let's go ahead and get into that conversation with him right now. Well, hey, Greg, welcome to the podcast. So glad that you're on today, man. This has been a long time coming. And it's good to see you too, my friend.
Oh my gosh, it's so great to be here, and it's great to reconnect with you, Dave. I've been watching you just blowing it up over there in Pittsburgh, and I've been chomping at the bit to get some time with you. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Well, you've been on your own growth journey, and I've been following yours as well. And so, just so the audience knows that you and I both have a passion for both emerging leaders and culture, the culture of an organization. And of course, with that, it just goes leadership in general. And, you've had your own growth journey. You're a US citizen, but you're not living in America right now. And so maybe share a little bit about that journey and where you are right now in the world as we're recording this.
Yeah, it's been actually a tremendous journey for me. And what I love so much about this piece of my journey was the reason I'm in Italy living here is because of my wife.
Yeah.
And this was an opportunity for me to support her because I'm retired Navy, and for years she followed me around and supported what I was doing and all my crazy ideas, even to the point where just not many years ago, I walked away from corporate leadership to start my own business. She was there supporting all of that. And when she got the call to come to Italy to work as the center manager at the USO here, it was a no-brainer for me to stop at what I was doing and just follow and support her activities, which, in retrospect is so leadership driven. Isn't that what we do as leaders is stop and find the opportunities to support the people we're leading?
Absolutely, man. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that had to be, to talk about, having a shift in your mindset and really making sure that you were that servant leader, really, that you were elevating your wife and supporting your wife in her journey, in her growth journey.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, so many things could have happened during that transition, from my business perspective and what I was doing. Oftentimes when we make a shift that we need, or the actual great word right now is make a pivot, right?
Yeah, right.
But we have to make, because we're always turning, right? We're always shifting. So pivot's a great word because you're always like planted, but you're moving the other foot. So I love the word pivot. So I'm making this pivot, but it could have gone south real easy. Just by me getting in my own head and making excuses of why things couldn't happen for me. I could have, I can't run my own business from Italy when all my clients are in the United States. Listen, I'm working over here coaching transitioning service members, and I work a full day. But the beautiful thing about it is I'm 6 hours ahead of the United States. So when I get home, I have a whole nother work day of coaching my clients. So it's a great way to balance the two. It can be exhausting.
Right, I'm sure. Yes.
But listen, it's not day in, day out, but it's awesome. But I could have easily dismissed all of that and said, you can't do that. You're going to have to give it all up and just forget it. But I didn't.
Well, you didn't. And what I know about you too is that when you got over there were some complexities about doing business in the States and things you could do and couldn't do, but that didn't stop you. You went ahead and you volunteered and you did a lot of volunteer work. And, if there's anything that I know about leadership is that the toughest leaders are volunteers, and they're the ones who have to actually lead volunteers. And so maybe share a little bit of that part of your journey once you got over there to Italy. And you decided to do the volunteer work.
Yeah, this is a question of asking yourself, where do I serve? How do I contribute? What can I do? Not focusing on what I cannot do. I already knew what I wasn't allowed to do.
Right.
So the only question in my mind left to ask was, what can I do? And of course, my wife was running the USO, which is an organization that supports the military. They're designed to connect the military family to home during deployments. So we have deployed members over here living overseas, and she has a great job of doing that. And so I wasn't working. I was a stay-at-home husband. And so I could have easily just hung out in Italy and just hung out on the piazza sipping my cafe. But no, I went to work and I started volunteering at the USO. I actually last year was selected as the retiree volunteer of the year for Caserma Italy in Italy. So it was great honor. Before you know it, it's beautiful when you're doing something you just love to do because you don't pay attention to that stuff. And next thing you know, I've got like almost 1,400 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Of volunteer time at this organization.
Wow.
If you hadn't have told me, or if you hadn't have printed that on a certificate, I would have never known. But I used to give my wife, a little jab saying, I'm like your fifth employee who works for free.
Yes, right, exactly.
But you just find where you can serve. As servant leaders serve. And in that capacity, it's interesting because in that capacity, I was actually able to get my finger on the pulse of this community because, as you know, I'm retired Navy and we're working on an Army base. So I'm literally a fish out of water.
Literally. Oh, that's good. Literally. I love it. Literally.
So volunteering gave me the ability to actually interact in that community and learn and hear and listen to what's going on, which is another leadership lesson. You want to know what's going on in your organization? Get out there and listen.
Yeah. You know, such a strong, I mean, we talked about this a few episodes ago. I know my son, Evan, and I talked about listening and listening generously and how that relates to jazz, but it also relates to leadership. And what a great tool to share with leaders is that get out and listen not to respond, but listen to understand. I mean, so beautiful. Yeah. What were some of the things that you learned in that process?
I learned the climate of this organization, really. I learned what the struggles were.
Oh, yeah.
And when you learn what those are, then you can begin to address them. And that led to this recent position where I'm now working with transitioning service members.
Amazing.
It was just so strange how it was just karma or fate or whatever, just like laying out this roadmap is like, hey, you'll get over to Italy and you will volunteer and you will learn the army and then you will help them transition.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, that's got to be, I mean, that has to be such again, talking about growth journey. I mean, there were steps along the way. You didn't see everything all at once, but you just took the next right step in front of you. And I guess maybe share with the audience a little bit about that. Like, what was that like? Just like, I mean, I know we've already talked about you getting over there and then starting to volunteer to do some things, just to do something. And then like, how did you know like what to do next?
I've always been the type of person to ask that very critical question you just asked. And the question is, what's next? And it's a question that doesn't allow you to settle as you're moving. And I learned this from I joined the Navy when I was 17 years old.
Oh, wow.
And it was very clear to me at an early age that, you know, you can't stop if you want to continue to grow.
Yeah.
And so for me, the golden question I always asked myself when I was reaching that goal I had set was, what's next? And so forecasting down the road reveals the next piece of the path, really. And so for me in particular, challenging myself or asking that golden question of what's next, what comes next is what reveals the path to keep you taking that next step.
Right. And you don't necessarily have to have the full picture of steps 1 through 10, but you just need that next one step. And you know, talk a little bit about that. I don't know if you have a process for this or not, but just asking yourself that what's next. I mean, is it something where you just journal? Is it something where, you know, sit and just think? What's your process for that like?
Yeah. You know, talking about growth, one of the things I've really grown into in the 3 years we've been living abroad is reflection. Spend a lot of time reflecting on situations, experiences, trying to capture lessons.
Yeah, sure.
And so for me, the process includes a lot of reflection time. I spend a lot of time sitting alone in quiet places and just thinking into things. One of the things I used to do was I would write a weekly email or a weekly journal.
Sure.
And what it was surrounding was the past week. And it forced me to reflect. And the question I would ask is, what lesson did I learn this week?
Yeah, nice.
And I would go through all the things that had happened to me and I would reflect. So reflection is one of the big pieces for me. Yeah. And I think the other thing is managing expectations. Here's one of our biggest challenges in my mind is our desire to want to keep up with what everybody else is doing. Yeah. And always comparing that comparison thing, right? You know, oh, look what they're doing. Look, that's a motivation killer to me because you're always gonna not be where somebody else is. And the funny thing is, somebody else is looking at you the same way. You're ahead of them.
Right,
It's like,
right.
it's this crazy mirror, a different plane
Yes.
perspective. But I
Yeah.
think having that, that expectation of yourself that it's okay,
Hmm.
wherever you are right now is
Yeah.
exactly where you're supposed to be.
Right, right. And that, just taking that framework and understanding that other people may be looking at me the same way I'm looking at them. It's kind of like this circular thing like, hey, look, we're in this together, and it doesn't matter where you are or where I am. I am where I'm supposed to be. And I think for me, that's one of the things that, especially emerging leaders, I'll get your take on this in a second, but I think for me, emerging leaders often do that comparison thing. Well, so and so got the promotion and I didn't. And I think that we have to be able to look at our framework and reframe situations around us and understand that maybe they were uniquely gifted for this particular opportunity. And maybe you're uniquely gifted for another opportunity. And understanding our unique ability, I think, is so key and probably part of the process of an emerging leader to be able to get that personal reflection time and understand, where is my unique ability? Where do I add the most value? What do you
Yeah.
think about that?
Yeah, no, you're spot on, David, of course. And you use the word reframing, and I
Yeah.
use a synonym, and it's perspective.
Yeah. Beautiful.
It's
Yeah.
perspective. And so you gave a great example because this happens all the time. You have
Yeah.
peers in the workplace, right? You
Mhm.
have other departmental managers or division managers,
Yeah.
And so, somebody gets promoted to director or vice president and you did
Yeah.
not. The focus or your perspective it needs to shift away from they got that. And it needs to come back to, what didn't I do or what can I do to position myself to get to where I want to be? What am I not doing
Yeah.
that's not me?
Yeah.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I love that you use the reframing reference. I love that. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what it takes, especially new leaders. Because listen, here's the fact. The fact is, new leaders or emerging leaders are insecure in their abilities to lead. And
Yeah.
there's reasons for that.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer that we've created those monsters because of the way we promote people into those
Mm.
leadership positions.
Oh, yeah. That's interesting.
We have not set them up for success. And that's
Yeah.
why I spend a lot of time developing and providing leadership development classes
Yeah.
and programs for companies. Is
Right.
because, listen, if you're going to promote them for whatever reason, let's give them a fighting chance.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's interesting too. You triggered a thought for me because when we promote somebody and now they are a people leader and they were a peer of the people that they lead, that's a challenge. I mean, have you seen, well, let me ask a different question. What have you seen in relation to that peer to peer, and then now I get the promotion, you didn't? How do we handle that? I'm kind of curious about it. We're going down a lot of different paths today, but I knew
Yeah.
this would be an awesome conversation.
No, another common thing that happens, right? And
Yeah.
what's really strange about it is, where I learned how to handle it was in the military because it
Ah,
happens
yeah.
all the time.
Sure, sure.
Right? I get promoted and the guy I was the same rank as yesterday, now I'm one rank higher than they are, right? And so we learn how to deal with that. Now,
Mhm.
in the military, of course, the chain of command and, you follow orders, and that's just the pecking order of things. Pecking orders, like the military rank structure, don't really exist in corporate America outside
Mhm.
of the military. And that was a big lesson I needed to learn.
Mm.
So, and
Say
and
more
this
about
goes
that.
Yeah, this goes along with the levels of leadership, right? Like, I'll tell you, to be honest, I hate to say it, and if there's any military folks listening to me, don't hate me for this. This is just Greg's perspective, okay? But when I got out of the military, I thought I knew everything I needed to know about leadership. And what I realized was I didn't know anything about it. And what I also learned was what we do in the military is actually one of the lowest levels of leadership we can operate from, because it's, you have to follow me because you have to. That's not a great place to lead from. Now, let me just caveat this, because I love my brothers and sisters in arms listening to this podcast. And I just want to say there are definitely people within our ranks who rise above that and do elevate themselves. And we know them because they shine as leaders even in the military. So
there are places for that kind of leadership. Even though it is the lowest form, I mean, I think is especially true in the military. Obviously, I mean, we're looking at being in harm's way and needing to be able to follow those orders because it's going to keep us all safe and so forth. But even in business, there are times when we may be in a situation that's a crisis and we have to lead from that form of leadership. It's not the best, but there are moments for that. But yeah, you're exactly right.
Oh, I love that you brought that up. I mean, the game changes when you're leading in crisis, right?
No doubt.
And that's when real leaders, in my mind, emerge. When you can have a chaotic situation, whether that's combat or COVID-19 and nobody's working in your building anymore, that's when true leaders emerge. I just did a talk, actually, when yesterday's Weekly Roar episode talks about the role of empathy right now in leadership. And it's along those same lines.
Why don't you say a little bit more about that, Greg? Because I think that all leaders, whether you're an emerging leader, rising leader, a senior leader, doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum, we all can benefit from empathy. And I think it's such a key, I'm going to call it a skill. It's a key skill for all of us to learn and be reminded of. So yeah, take us down that path for a second.
Yeah, empathy is interesting because it is a trait of a great leader. And what's funny about it is if you pull a list of what makes a great leader, you might find empathy listed somewhere on the list. But if you even do find it, you'll find it towards the bottom, because there's so many other things that come to people's mind. What I've found is that the struggle of empathy for leaders comes from a base of feeling weak, not wanting to be perceived as weak. Because when empathy deals with emotions and feelings,
right,
and our ability to not only understand somebody else's feelings and emotions, but being able to change our actions from that understanding. That's what empathy really, in my mind, is. And so when you start talking about, hey, David, how are you feeling today? Well, I'm angry and I don't know what to do with that. And now I don't look competent because I'm a leader that doesn't know how to handle this emotion ball. And so I think empathy is a critical trait that and I love that you said skill. And when you say skill, that tells me I can learn it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that was kind of where I was headed with my thought process too, is that it is a skill. It's something that I can learn, but I got to practice. I have to be able to put some things in place so that I have a place that I can actually practice it, and maybe it's a group. I know that's one of the things I do in the Emerging Leader Inner Circle. We provide situations, scenarios, opportunities to practice coaching, practice talking, and those kinds of things, because our leaders need a safe place. And so that skill, I think, is so important. But and I know you've got a group as well that you work with.
Yeah. Let me give your listeners a tip on if they want to start working on being better empaths, so to speak, right? Yeah. Here's a super easy trick that you can do right now. You don't even have to practice it. When somebody talks to you, or if you ask the question, hey, how are you feeling? And somebody tells you a feeling like, well, I'm not feeling that great. I'm a little upset right now. Right. And, oh, well, what's going on? Well, I feel left out of the conversation. Right. So you're feeling left out of something. What you do, if you want to start learning how to be more empathetic, is take that emotion that you just heard and then ask yourself, when was a time that I felt that way? And that helps you to start to relate to that same emotion that you just heard. And then now, listen, you can understand. And that's what empathy is about. I want to make that clear, is it's about an understanding of somebody else's perspective and feelings. It's not agreeing with them. That's a big piece of it. Just because I'm empathetic to you doesn't mean I agree or anything else. I don't have to subscribe to your story. I don't have to agree with your perspective. But what I do need to do is put forth an effort to understand that feeling and how you are. And the best way to do that is relate it to how we feel in a situation that's similar. So when was a time that I felt that way?
Yeah, that's so good. I want to go back for just a second to before we started hit record. We started going down a path where I thought, this is getting too good. Wait, we better hit record here. But you talked about taking this new role and working with transitioning military people. And oftentimes I hear emerging leaders and, quite frankly, senior leaders as well, this whole inner critic thing that we beat ourselves up on, and that inner critic voice can get really, really loud. And I know that you talked about that a little bit in kind of that transition from being, it's truly a volunteer, which is super powerful, to now you are paid to be able to help these military people transition out of the military back into civilian life. And you were sharing that inner critic was kind of loud and you had to really silence it. It's a huge problem and a huge challenge of every leader. I'd love to just hear your thoughts on that. Every time I get a chance to talk to a leader who's willing to talk about that inner critic, I want to talk to them about it, because we all deal with it. I deal with it. I mean, and so I'm just kind of curious.
Absolutely. So imagine this. Here's a guy who's making a lot of money in corporate America. I resign to start my own business. My wife's looking at me like I'm crazy. I start my own business and I land my first contract, and it's 6 figures. So I'm feeling pretty good about myself. And 6 months into that 1-year contract, my wife tells me we're moving to Italy. And so now my world could have imploded, exploded. It wouldn't matter. It was shaken up, right? So anytime we're challenged with a situation where there's a shift from the norm, right? I know you always talk about the comfort zone and the growth zone, right? We talk about these and they're critical. They're critical. And I talk to my transitioning service members about this all the time because they're scared. It's fear. It's fear. And what I tell them is everything that you've ever wanted is just on the other side of that. And so what we're dealing with, that inner critic or that gremlin, whatever you want to call it, the inner bully.
Right. I love it.
You got to, I think awareness, one, knowing that it's talking. So when I was going to become a certified professional coach, one of the exercises was that we named it.
We gave it a name. I did the same thing. Yes, exactly.
You name it, right? So you're aware of it. And there's old Sally again piping up in the back, right? For those of you named Sally, I was just using that as an example. I didn't mean you. But awareness around it is huge, that you have this inner critic, and we all do. Right. I mean, and it sounds like these common, you're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not experienced enough. You're not something. And this is all fear. This is that you're afraid you can't do something. And once you don't subscribe to the belief, because it's BS, right? The belief system. And once you choose not to subscribe to that line of thinking, that's when you start to see the shift. So here I am in Italy. And like you said, I know you were, it is just a volunteer because listen, I wasn't getting paid.
Well, yeah.
I'm just like donating time, going there and spending the day and trying to find stuff to do.
Right.
So mentally, that could have definitely been a drawback.
Sure.
But I will tell you, I told my wife, I said, listen, I'm not going to work here just to work. If I take a job in Italy, it's going to be aligned with what I'm already doing.
Yeah.
And I waited, and it was 3 years before this opportunity presented itself.
Sure.
So you can imagine the kind of mental gymnastics I had to go through.
Right.
I could have been playing the tape like, you're washed up. Lion Enterprise doesn't exist anymore. Nobody knows who you're, not doing that stuff anymore. But no, I mean, you were part of my 100th episode, the weekly roar. And you know what? I'm rolling up on 200. I'm on like 171 right now.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
So the consistency is, drives you, but awareness that you've got the critic and making a choice not to subscribe to what it's telling you. Because, you know what a great question to ask yourself is when you hear that? Like, if you hear that little buzzing saying, you can't do this, man. What are you doing? Ask yourself this. How true is that? How true is that?
Question.
Yeah.
Great question. Oh my gosh. I love that. We are giving some really great tips on a lot of different topics. I knew that we were going to go this way, which is so cool. Well, and you mentioned the weekly roar. I want to make sure that you tell everybody where they can get access to you, where they can hear the weekly roar, because I know that you give some incredible tips and topics on the weekly roar. So share that with everybody.
Yeah. So of course, my company's Lion Enterprise. So of course I have the weekly roar.
Of course.
The weekly roar is a 20-minute talk every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. It's a live spot on Facebook in the group called The Lion's Den. It's free. The group's free. It's not a private group. Anybody can find The Lion's Den. And we can put the link to it when you put out the podcast. But definitely. I'd love for, pop in. And what I do is I take those episodes and they're all the videos that I've recorded, all 171 of them are actually hosted on my website at lion-enterprise.com. Okay. And it's under the Lion's Pride Library.
Okay. Nice. I like it. You got the theme there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, and it's all free. I don't charge for access to that, but of course, forgive me if you go and look at video number 1 and then you go look at video number, if you want to know what growth looks like, go do that.
For sure.
I've done some series on leadership and personal growth stuff. And then I just recently broke out and I'm just doing some topics on what I think makes a great leader. And so each week for the last few weeks, I've been just pulling out one trait. Like I mentioned today's Wednesday. Earlier today, I was talking about empathy. So it's been great, but I'd love to have you.
We will make sure that we put those in the show notes so that people can click the link and absolutely. And what I'd love for people to do who are listening is definitely go out and join Greg's group. Go listen to some of his work, because man, I'm telling you what, he is a leadership guru and he really knows his stuff, and he shares stuff that he's learned along the way, as well as things that he's learned with his clients along the way as well. I can't promote you enough. I just want to make sure that people come out and check out your material and get connected with you, because it's such a great, you give such great practical advice. And I love that, Greg.
Yeah. Thanks so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Well, is there anything that we haven't talked about today that you think we should talk about and just maybe like wrap a bow on this conversation? Because I know it's wide ranging, but it's been good.
Yeah, because your podcast is in the growth space, we probably can't downplay our growth enough. I think that really, at the end of the day, you can be a charismatic leader, you can be a great planner, a great manager, but if you're not growing, that will be short-lived.
Yeah.
And so when at the end of the day, it all really comes back. And that's why I love your podcast so much, is because really at the end of the day, it's about lifelong learning and continuing to become the person you were meant to be. It's not an overnight thing. It's a lifelong journey. So growth space is perfect.
I'm so glad you shared that, because it's not just a time frame or a season. It's a lifelong journey. And I mean, it really is all about getting new ideas, getting around people who help us think differently, get that different perspective, and books and podcasts and just continue to grow into who we've been created to be. And I'm so glad that you said that, Greg. That's awesome. Thank you for taking the time to be here in the growth space with me, because I know it's later your time. And so appreciate you being here, my friend. And I'm just really grateful. And make sure, if you're listening, if you're watching this, go out and check out the Weekly Roar, and check out lion-enterprise.com. Did I get that right?
You got it. Perfect.
Awesome, man. Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes as well. Well, thank you so much, my friend.
It was my pleasure. Thanks, David.
Well, that was such a great episode with Greg. And I really loved his story about yielding to his wife's opportunity to go to Italy. And what a great example of being a servant leader. I really just loved that. The other thing that stood out to me as well was just Greg's comment about listening, and how listening will help you hear the needs of your organization. I think that is so true. When we listen, we can hear what our people need and what is needed within the organization. The other thing that he shared was so true, especially with emerging leaders, staying away from the comparison trap. I mean, comparing yourself to where someone else is just a recipe for disaster. And I love what he said too. He just said, it's okay where you are. And I just want to say that to you, leader, right now. It is okay where you are. You don't want to stay there. You want to keep searching and growing. And that's the thing that he talked about at the very end too. He said, be a lifelong learner. That growth isn't something that just you make it to the top and you're done. But it's a lifelong journey, and make sure that you are around people will keep you growing and really keep you stretching. The other thing that Greg shared was some really practical advice about silencing the inner critic. And the first thing is just becoming aware of it, noticing when it rears its ugly head, and name it then. Put a name to that voice, and then don't subscribe to the belief. Make the choice that you're not going to subscribe to that belief. And then ask yourself, how true is that? Whatever it's saying, whatever that inner critic is saying, ask, how true is that? So I hope that you really enjoyed this conversation. Greg is such a great leader, and he has some great advice and great topics that he shares weekly at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on his Facebook channel, The Weekly Roar. Go out and check it out. Also, check out his website, lion-enterprise.com. Just follow Greg. He's a great leader, and he's also been a great friend. And so we appreciated Greg being on today. And in the line of being a lifelong learner, I just want to encourage you to get out to the Inner Circle Summit on December the 10th. The registration is open, and that can be found at davidmcglennon.com/Inner Circle Summit, all lowercase, Inner Circle Summit. And I hope to see you there. It's going to be a great day. We have Jeff Hancher. We have Dr. Brian Glibkowski. I'll be sharing a little bit as well as our keynote speaker, Paul Martinelli. If you haven't heard, if you didn't tune in last time, Paul Martinelli is our keynote speaker. Paul has shared the stage with greats, Seth Godin, Les Brown, just so many great names. He has grown companies to multiple millions of dollars in revenue. And so he is a growth and scaling expert. And I know that you're going to want to be in the room. And if you want to have an opportunity to ask him questions about your own growth journey, whether it be your own business growth or your own personal growth or your team growth, we've got a VIP option where you can ask him questions in a very intimate setting the evening before on December 9th, on Thursday, December the 9th. So make sure you go out to davidmcglennon.com/Inner Circle Summit and get registered. Hope to see you there. And until next time, remain in that growth space and be well, my friends.